This video was brought to you by my loyal patrons. Pledge today and you can participate in choosing what video comes to the channel next. Link in the description. Earlier this year, I made a massive video covering the 3 Cars movies. My findings were that the first and the third ones are wonderful. The second one is garbage, and I came to the ultimate conclusion that despite its low points, this franchise about these silly talking vehicles is actually pretty good. So imagine my excitement that in the same year I got back into Cars, Disney announced there would be a new Cars show on Disney Plus called Cars on the Road, complete with Owen Wilson returning as Lightning McQueen and Larry the Cable Guy returning as Mater. The hype was real. I wasn't sure what to expect. The show came out in September, and I watched the whole thing the day of. And now I'm here to finally give you my full thoughts on it. Did this show live up to the hype? Is it a worthy successor to the movie trilogy? Is it good? Well, let's dive in. Cars on the Road is a 9 mini-episode series focused on Lightning McQueen and Mater as they travel cross-country on a road trip to the East Coast for Mater's sister's wedding. The series is a loose setup for episodic adventures that they both have along the way, including a dinosaur park, a haunted mansion, a creepy circus, a Bigfoot monster, salt flats racers, and much, much more. The final episode sees the duo reach their destination, where they reunite with Cruz Ramirez, and we meet Mater's aforementioned sister, Mato.
Like tomato without the tub?
But she looks nothing like him. Shouldn't she be a truck? How do siblings work in this universe? I've been meaning to cover this show for a little while now, as I have quite a lot to say about it. I am admittedly a pretty big Cars fan, so there were some things about this show that were really fun for me. But there were also some things that also rather annoyed me. So instead of going through each episode one by one, I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and then how I would have handled the show. Let's start off with the good stuff. So let's get the obvious out of the way. The animation is stunning. The visuals in the Cars franchise continue to push the envelope with every new installment, and this show is no exception. I was actually quite surprised at how real the textures and the lighting all looked. As are most of the Disney shows based on movies, I expected this series to be animated by the Disney television animation section of the company. The first thing that came to mind was the new Monsters at Work show that they made about a year ago. While it doesn't look bad, it's clear there was a much lower budget for that show versus the Monsters University movie that preceded it. That was not the case here. Pixar themselves animated Cars on the Road, and you can tell. It matches that glorious level of realism that they really pushed for in Cars 3. The lighting is one to none, the textures are hyper real, the dust clouds and glares, they all look fantastic. I also really appreciate the experimentation with different animation styles throughout the show. The Dino Park episode shows the dinosaur cars in that dream sequence moving like stop-motion caricatures, homaging those old classic stop-motion monster movies like Godzilla. The blending of line art and 3D models in the truck's musical number was also really fun and vibrant. Visuals-wise, this was something totally new for the Cars franchise, and I'm all here for it. I love seeing this experimentation. Cars on the Road unfortunately seems to have taken the Cars 2 route of logic and doesn't really stick to the set rules of the universe. Now, dinosaurs definitely existed somehow. The cars have mammalian brains, apparently. The telephones in the hotel are just regular human telephones. Why is there a washing machine here? What clothes are the cars washing? And again with the drink glasses! How were they supposed to pick them up? But the difference here is that Cars on the Road is pretty self-aware about its absurdity. In fact, it pokes fun at itself a lot of the time. Cars 2 took itself pretty seriously, and as a result, the stuff in the universe that weren't thought out were annoying and distracting. But here, instead of feeling irritated by the universe not making sense, you as a viewer feel like more you're in on the joke. It's like they're saying, hey, we know this doesn't make sense, but we're not trying to do anything serious here, so don't think about it. All the humor derived from this hits really hard, like when McQueen gets scared in the hotel and tries to flip around, but he can't and has to do this awkward 20-point turn in the hallway, because he's a car and can't just flip around quickly. Brilliant. I love the door gag when Mater dies. First time a car door in the universe is ever shown opening. It's just a black void inside. And I love this self-aware CGI joke.
What's CGI?
Well, Mater, that's technical. It comes out of a computer somehow.
The CGI itself is starting to question its existence. It's getting too smart. One huge positive for me is, surprisingly, Mater. In my Big Cars video before, I talked about how I really enjoy Mater when he's not the focus. He's outright hilarious as a secondary character in Cars 1, and he had that really great scene in Cars 3 when he and McQueen just talked. Cars 2 made the mistake of making him the main, and he is unbearable in that. He talks so much and you just want him to shut up.
Like a good neighbor, Mater is there.
So when I heard Mater would be one of the two leads in this Cars on the Road show, I was a little worried he'd be a bit much. I'm happy to say Mater is not annoying in this show. He's actually rather delightful, and I think the show's self-awareness played a big part in how he was written. This line in the first episode kind of confirms that they were aware of that.
I mean, I love Mater, but that's a lot of Mater.
Very much speaking for the audience there. Mater is very much a mood throughout this show. He rolls his eyes at many of the silly gimmick episode concepts, he gets frustrated and competitive, and he sometimes says things that are actually quite witty or smart.
That's cold. They didn't even try to save me.
It's funny, I was actually thinking that the first time I watched it, and then he just flat out said it. It's awesome. At the same time though, he's still the go-lucky, wide-eyed, happy tow truck that we all know and love. I appreciate they had restraint and didn't write him as an idiot. Mater is actually quite a smart, likable lead character in this show. I also really liked the wholesomeness of Mater and McQueen's friendship throughout this too. I do have some issues with it, which I'll get into, but there are moments where it's very clear why these two are friends. I love when they're both singing some dopey song on the road together. I like when McQueen tells Mater that he is absolutely a truck.
You are 100% a truck.
And I liked when Mater tried to get McQueen to smile after his movie gig didn't go as planned. Two totally different cars from totally different worlds, and yet they're friends. It's so wholesome. And lastly, I loved some of the episode concepts. A lot of these are just kind of dumb gimmicks to sell whatever toys, like dinosaur car toys or circus car toys, you know. And those are the ones I'm not the most keen on. I really enjoy Cars when they take real-world car concepts and find a way to work them into the Cars universe. Good example of that would be like the Demolition Derby in Cars 3. That whole scene is really fun and memorable. The two most notable episodes of this show, in my opinion, are the ones that ran with their concepts the most. And that is the Mad Max Road Warriors episode with all the crazy post-apocalyptic car designs, and the Salt Flats episode. Two very car-focused concepts. In fact, I think the Salt Flat episode is my favorite episode of the show. All these prototype cars coming together to break speed records is really fun, and I wish we got to spend more time here. I'm kind of shocked that they didn't do anything with Salt Flats racers in any of the movies prior to this. And also, while we're on the topic, this is the first time we see a car wash in the Cars franchise. Is that weird to anyone else, or is it just me? How is it that it's taken this long to show a car wash in Cars? You think that's something they'd show on like day one. I also like how whales are submarines in this universe. That's pretty clever. Alrighty, I've gone through everything that I really like about the show. Cars on the Road is not without fault though, as there is quite a lot that didn't really do it for me. So let's talk about those now. The lack of a plot. My biggest gripe and biggest disappointment with Cars on the Road is the lack of a plot. Now, there is technically a plot, but it's almost non-existent. They have to get to the East Coast for a wedding. 8 episodes of unrelated adventures happen, then they reach the wedding. Okay. The whole show, by design, was just an excuse to have Mater and McQueen in different gimmicky locations so they could produce an array of different toys, like dinosaur cars, circus cars, prototype race cars, etc., etc. We all know that. We knew that was going to be the case from day one. That is always the case with every new Cars product. But just because something is made for toys doesn't mean it still can't be well written, right? It's the lack of major connecting elements or any sort of major character arcs from our two mains that let this down for me. There is almost a cohesive plot. You can tell that there was some sort of idea for a narrative here that must have been sidestepped somewhere along the way. In 2 of the episodes, Mater wants to do something better than McQueen. That is his main drive for getting streamlined in the Salt Flats episode.
I've always wanted to go faster and faster.
Which is a nice callback to that deleted scene from the first movie.
I always wanted to be a race car.
Then after that episode, it's sort of forgotten about. But then it comes to light again in the B-movie episode.
Lightning, you're good at everything. You gotta leave a few leftovers for the rest of us.
And then after that episode, they just sort of forget that he has this desire completely, and there is no payoff. McQueen and Mater fight in the next episode, but it's entirely unrelated. I have to wonder why they didn't follow through with this plot. I think giving Mater this desire to do something better that drives his actions through all the gimmicky locations they come to would have made for a more overall impacting story, and would endear us more to the plight of these characters. This show would have been a great opportunity to have McQueen and Mater's friendship be tested again. They did already do that in Cars 2, yeah, but this time they could flip-flop the roles, and have Mater be the one that gets upset with McQueen. They sort of did this, but not really. At least not to the extent that I was hoping for. The lack of any returning characters. When Pixar originally announced this show, they stated that many faces, new and old, would be appearing along the way. Well, I counted 1. Literally just 1. Where's all these other old faces? They also once said that Planes characters would be appearing in this. What happened there? Was that one circus plane a Planes character? Was that supposed to be someone? The lack of a bigger cast is felt greatly in my opinion. I'm all for Mater and McQueen being the stars, but there are hundreds of Cars characters in the library. Use some of them, huh? Have Mater and McQueen meet some familiar faces that stops they make. They could have had some racer that we know of be present at the Salt Flats, or maybe have Minnie and Van show up somewhere on the highway. I don't know, anything. Once again, the Radiator Springs gang do absolutely nothing. They were pretty sidestepped in Cars 2, they were sidestepped even more in Cars 3, and now all of them only appear here in the opening scene of the first episode. Most of them don't even speak. And that's it. Surely some of them, Sally at the very least, could have shown up at the wedding at the end. Our only returning face was Cruz Ramirez, and I was happy to see her again because I really like Cruz. However, I thought her return was handled poorly. They shoehorned her into the final episode with the weirdest excuse ever.
Oh, it's my cousin Mateo's wedding. He's getting hitched to some
eccentric socialite.
Oh, isn't that convenient? Really? Was that the best you could come up with? Going by their conversation, it seems like Cruz went off to be a big-time racer after Cars 3, and doesn't really keep in touch with McQueen? What? I thought McQueen became her crew chief. That's literally what the end of Cars 3 showed us. Did they just ditch that? Why would they do that? Also, and I might be in the minority on this, but was anyone else put off by the fact that neither of the race cars race in this show? McQueen does go fast at the Salt Flats, but that's about it really. Cruz appears and doesn't really do anything besides talk. It seems kind of like a wasted opportunity in my opinion. So Ivy exists. Ivy is a monster truck and one of the prominent new characters, who I strangely have not mentioned at all yet in this video. Well, there's reason for it. She doesn't do anything. Ivy had a pretty strong introduction, I think. I liked her backstory. She was once a performing monster truck at a demolition derby, where she would go out and crush cars. Oof, a bit dark there. While she loved performing, she couldn't stomach her guilt and eventually ran off to hide in the woods. McQueen and Mater find her and convince her to come on the road with them. She finds her place at the circus they stop at and rediscovers her passion for performing. Ivy finds her place in the world and has a happy ending. Except they throw that away by having her show up again in the B-movie episode where she says she dumped the circus as soon as she got noticed.
Circus was amazing, but what are the chances I get discovered on stage and cast in a real movie? Once in a lifetime, right?
Well, that sucks. Makes that time we spent building her up feel kind of pointless now, huh? I liked Ivy enough, though her character was just a little too similar to Cruz in my opinion. You know, same kind of backstory. Had an opportunity to do what she loved. She ran off after some horrible incident. She was rediscovered by McQueen, and then she finds her place in the world doing what she loves. It's like the same idea, and personality-wise, she's kind of similar to Cruz too. I don't get why they didn't have her stick around for the trip longer. They kind of dumped her as soon as they found her. It felt very rushed. Would have been cool if she could have participated in the Truck's musical number. She is a monster truck, after all. Missed opportunity there. Overall, I think Ivy's potential in this show was kinda squandered. My last gripe with this show, and this is more a nitpick than anything, is the overuse of existing character models. I don't usually give a shit about stuff like this. I totally understand that there's no reason to build and rig all new models for characters that appear on screen for only a few seconds. But the amount of times the same car models appeared throughout the show started to get a little distracting to me. That circus ringleader is just Sterling, but with stripes. That blue truck here is just Smokey, but blue. How many goddamn times are they going to reuse the Guido model? Isn't Guido like some unique Italian designed forklift that wouldn't be common in the US? Why does it keep appearing everywhere? There's like 20 different forklift models in your asset library. Use a different one for goodness sake. While animation-wise Cars on the Road looks visually stunning, its overuse of the same models over and over again really kinda took me out of it at times. So, now that we've gone through all of the good and all of the bad, let's try to figure out a way to revise the show, keeping all the good stuff intact and fixing all the bad stuff. Here's my treatment of Cars on the Road. First of all, I'd add an episode, bringing the total episode number to 10. I'd add this episode right at the beginning, and the whole thing would take place in Radiator Springs. The show starts off establishing McQueen is in his post-retirement. We see a bit of what he's been up to since the end of Cars 3, and perhaps a little montage showing him as Cruz's crew chief, and some of the trophies from their recent wins. He's been spending a lot of time at the track with Cruz, and has kind of been neglecting time with Mater. Mater receives an invite to his sister's wedding on the East Coast. Sally encourages McQueen to go with them on a road trip to rekindle their friendship. It's the off-season, so McQueen has the time to do so. McQueen is a bit reluctant at the idea at first, as he's worried spending so much time with Mater will get on his nerves. This, of course, is a clever setup because we'll find out later on, McQueen is the one that gets on Mater's nerves. We're gonna do a flip-flop of the Cars 2 plot. The trip is arranged, and McQueen and Mater set off on their cross-country journey in the early morning, driving into the sunrise. Episode 2, Dino Park. Before reaching the Dino Park, McQueen mentions that Mater chose the last few stops, and they were all busts. McQueen takes charge and chooses the next stop at the Dino Park, much to Mater's non-enthusiasm. Episode plays out pretty much the same. Episode 3, Lights Out. McQueen chooses to stay at the Haunted Hotel, and Mater visibly starts to get fed up with McQueen taking charge of what is supposed to be a best friends trip. Episode plays out pretty much the same. Episode 4, Salt Fever. Mater and McQueen arrive at the Salt Flats. The reason they've stopped here is because Cruz is training here during her off-season, and McQueen wanted to stop by to say hi. I think having Cruz appear in this episode makes a hell of a lot more sense than just shoehorning her into the final episode, and plays better into the fact that she is a race car. Finally, we get to see the star race cars, race! Wow! Mater is given the offer to be streamlined to race. This is his golden opportunity to do something better than McQueen for once. He takes it, and he fails. Episode 5, The Legend. While camping out, Mater and McQueen get tangled with some hunters and meet Ivy. This episode also basically plays out the same way, and Ivy joins the two on the road at the end. Episode 6, Trucks. I'm changing the order a bit here. Ivy is still with the duo on their journey at this point, and is involved in the Trucks musical number. There is a moment, maybe before the song, that Mater feels a little emasculated by Ivy, her being a much bigger truck than him and all. Just a little instance that gives her some thematic purpose to being involved in the show's plot at all. Ivy receives her makeover at the car wash at the truck stop. Meanwhile, Mater receives some validation from the bigger trucks, boosting his confidence after his failure at the Salt Flats. Episode 7, Showtime. Now for the circus episode. This basically plays out the same too, with Ivy finding her place in the world. She does not reappear after this one. McQueen and Mater continue on their trip. Episode 8, B-Movie. While traveling through a small town, McQueen gets noticed and cast in a B-movie, and he's terrible at acting. Mater ends up getting the role, and he's much better. For the first time in his life, Mater is better at something than McQueen. McQueen, of course, is jealous, and the two have a heart-to-heart and fight. The movie ends up being rewritten and the two are fired. They continue on their way on bitter terms. Episode 9, Road Rumblers. This episode opens up with the two still upset with each other. They encounter the Road Rumblers, and just like in the actual episode, McQueen tries to get them and their rival clan to see eye to eye. He gives a little speech, and while giving it, realizes how much of a jerk he's been to Mater. Episode 10, Getting Hitched. The two finally arrive at the East Coast for Mato's wedding. Sally is there, and maybe a couple other familiar faces. Some of Mater's extended family, perhaps, like his cousins Buford, Cletus, and Judd. Nice little wink wink for the hardcore fans. And just to tie it all together, perhaps the truck Mato is marrying is Mater's childhood bully, Bubba. And even after all these years later, he's still a jerk to Mater. Upon witnessing how competitive Mato is and how much of a jerk his soon-to-be in-law is to Mater, McQueen feels sorry for his friend and finally understands his desire to be the best at something, because he certainly wasn't given the chance growing up. Mato gets married, Mater gives his nice little friendship speech, and the show ends with the two driving home together. The end. Now, is my treatment perfect? No, but I think it does a better job at tying all of these events together. Cars on the Road definitely exists. I don't know, I don't have any strong feelings on it this way or that. It's not egregiously bad or anything like Cars 2, where you just get mad watching it, but it's nowhere near the level of storytelling present in the first and third films. It has its moments, there's things in it that I do really like, but overall it falls somewhere in the middle of the ranking for me. I'm a little disappointed with the show, if I'm honest. I didn't exactly go into it expecting to be blown away with a crazy, introspective character story or anything, but after the bar Cars 3 set, I was expecting at least an overarching connective narrative, and what was given was basically just a string of unrelated vignettes that eventually ended with a wedding. Like I said, it's not bad, but I can definitely see someone losing interest in this after the first few episodes. Kids will definitely like it, that's for sure, but for me, it's a very inconsequential show that doesn't really further the stories of any of its characters. Some characters I think it actually does a disservice to. Cars on the Road just exists. It looks great, and I love some of the experimentation and its episode concepts, but the writing just isn't there, and it left a lot to be desired. It's supplemental content for Cars fans that I don't think I'll be revisiting anytime soon. And that's really a shame, because as the first and third movies showed us, when the writers do sit down and take their time, they really can produce some amazing stories with these characters. Unfortunately, I just don't think Cars on the Road was one of those. I really very much doubt this is the last time we'll be seeing the likes of Mater or McQueen. Cars is just too popular to let lie. I look forward to what Pixar attempts to do with these characters in the future. Whether that's a season 2 to this show or a whole new project entirely, I'm interested. Hopefully next time they don't leave all their other main characters in the dust again. Seriously, why does Sally never get to do anything?